Sometimes, my friends, there are moments when geopolitics abandons all subtlety. Watching the Swedish royal family land in Canada, trailed by defense executives and ministers, I felt the usual cynicism fade, replaced by something stranger, the quiet recognition that the rules might actually be changing. When a king flies in, you know this isn't actual business as usual, and somewhere an American president is probably not amused. This is a story about fighter jets, but also about sovereignty, about whether Canada can or will ever truly chart its own course. The stakes aren't just military, they're about who gets to decide what Canada becomes and who profits along the way. In this video, I want to explore why this deal matters, what's driving the sudden collision of interests, and the unnerving tactics unfolding behind closed doors. We'll also confront what no one really wants to admit, that power, when challenged, always pushes back. Now, this is something that's always terrifying, Standing up to someone during injustice, fighting for what's right. It takes courage, doesn't it? So let me ask you, if you were the one making this call, would you risk angering the United States for the promise of real industrial independence? Does national self-reliance matter more than avoiding trouble with a superpower neighbor? I want you to really imagine actually being the prime minister here, with all the possible stakes. Do let me know in the comments if you like. Before we begin, a personal note, your favorite part of the video, I bet. I've written a book called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies. It's about staying clear, calm, and grounded, especially when the world distorts around you. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by noise or unsure whom to trust, this book is definitely for you. I have now also added a 24-minute podcast session discussing the book in details. So for anyone curious about that, the links are below to both, along with a launch video if you want to dig deeper into this. There's also a subscriber discount, so hit that subscribe button and check them out. Now, it's not every week that a European monarch arrives in Ottawa flanked by defense ministers and arms executives, but these are not normal times, right? King Carl XVI Gustaf and Queen Sylvia of Sweden, accompanied by Sweden's Deputy Prime Minister and a major business delegation, are on a state visit to Canada, and the backdrop is far more than ceremonial. Canada's Defence Industrial Review, once a quiet bureaucratic affair, has now become a stage for international theatre. The Swedish visit and the involvement of Saab make clear that Canada is being courted not just for a purchase, but for a partnership. And the optics are unmissable. Royals in formal procession, minister in negotiations, and a pitch not simply to buy Sweden's Saab Gripen fighter jets, but to assemble them and maintain them on Canadian soil. They weren't just pacing around doing courtesy calls here, I think. This is a declaration of a sort. Sweden is betting big, deploying its most persuasive instruments of statecraft, signaling that it sees Canada as a partner worth courting, not simply a client to invoice. Now, on a personal level, I found there is something oddly reassuring about the seriousness with which Sweden approaches this pitch. In a world saturated with shadowy details and cheap gestures, sometimes the presence of actual royalty forces everyone to pay attention. I found myself wondering, does this only happen when the old order is truly at risk? And in the moment, it becomes actually clear, yeah, perhaps it does. The stakes are higher than just jets and jobs. They touch on who writes the rules, who gets to build the future, and who benefits. Now, in my view, the picture on the other side of the room is stark. The F-35 Lightning II, built by Lockheed Martin, looks less like a fighting jet and more like a monument to 21st century complexity and, by many accounts, dysfunction. Decades in the making, multi-billion-dollar overruns, persistent technical flaws, US congressional voices have gone so far as to call the F-35 program a rat hole. Yet for the United States, it stands for something more, a symbol of alliance, of industrial independence, a kind of economic handcuff as much as a combat aircraft. But here's the catch. In my view, the Lockheed contracts are designed structurally to ensure dependency. The planes can only be serviced by Lockheed or its authorized network at whatever price they set over the full life cycle. As critics have pointed out, costs spiral, glitches multiply. In Canada, for example, the pricing estimates for F-35 purchases have grown markedly. Canada's deal, which was pitched around 19 billion Canadian dollars, now faces projections of a substantially higher figure. Every dollar channeled into this deal, in my judgment, risks being a quiet drain from Canadian public budgets into US defense industry coffers. And for ordinary Canadians, it is not just a matter of national pride or principle, but this becomes a real decision between seeing public funds flow into Canadian jobs or disappearing into the labyrinth of US defense procurement. To think clearly here, I believe you must hold two conflicting truths at once, that alliances are essential in an era of rising global threats, and that those alliances can also become expensive traps, and recognize that tension is, I'd argue, the work of staying awake. In my view, Sweden's counteroffer, the Saab JAS 39 Gripen, is more than just a jet. It's an industrial proposal wrapped in diplomatic velvet with hard steel underneath. The pitch is very direct: assemble and service the jets in Canada, transfer technology, train Canadian engineers, supply chains and manufacturers, create 10,000 new jobs, not as a vague promise, but as a guarantee backed by public statements. They've already done this. The technical arguments behind it are real. The Gripen was designed for cold, rugged landscapes, able to land on ordinary highways, restart within minutes, and thrive in the kind of frozen extremes where other jets might falter. The plane's development included operating from snow-covered strips of just 500 meters, that's very short for a plane, with turnaround times of 10 minutes, that's insane. For a country as vast and severe as Canada, these are not just sales points, they are strategic necessities. But in my view, the subtext is even more telling here. This is not about jets alone, or even just about jobs, but about the ability to say no, to step away from the American defense system's gravitational pull and invest in actual domestic capability, to keep the expertise, the technology, and crucially, the options at home. Reflecting on this, I'm struck by how rare these opportunities actually are. Most countries never get the chance to renegotiate their dependencies to this extent. Even fewer choose to actually take the chances when they come. It feels to me like a moment of potential change. If Canada goes this route, it won't just be a procurement decision. It could be a statement of industrial intention. And that is, in my opinion, definitely worth paying attention to. Now, naturally, when the balance of power is challenged, pushback follows. The United States has moved from supporting to warning and finally to outright economic threats. The message broadcast by the US ambassador is not subtle. Future trade talks, the entire framework of North American cooperation could hinge on Canada's willingness to stay in line and buy the F-35s. It's almost refreshing in its directness, to be honest. The usual layers of plausible deniability have been stripped away, replaced by blunt conditionality: buy our jets or risk your seat at the table. Come on. This is where things get very uncomfortable, because this is not just about defense procurement anymore, but about the architecture of Canadian sovereignty tested in real time. A good critical thinker doesn't just ask what is happening, but who benefits from your reaction. The spectacle of the Swedish royal family, the veiled threats from Washington, each side is leveraging symbols and pressure points, hoping to sway not just politicians, but public sentiment itself. Now, I have to admit, I feel a grudging admiration for the transparency of this play. For once, everyone is actually saying the quiet part out loud. Zooming out, though, this is not just a Canada story. Across the globe, countries are stepping away from American hardware, choosing European alternatives, and building new industrial ties. Colombia, Hungary, the Czech Republic, all moving to diversify their defense relationships, rewiring their old map. And there's a wild card as well, Ukraine, filled with existential conflict. They have placed an order so vast that Swedish industry alone can't fulfill it, and the solution was to build it in Canada using Canadian workers and know-how to supply both Canada and Ukraine's needs. There's another video on this one. Check it out if you're interested. It's one of those rare moments when the logic of sovereignty and solidarity briefly align. A new factory, a new industry, a new sense of what is possible, if and only if Canada is willing to accept the risks. To me, this feels like a hinge in history, the kind of juncture that won't be obvious until years later when it's actually too late to reverse. In the end, the real question is not about fighter jets or even just about jobs, but about who gets to write the terms of engagement, about whether a nation can claim true independence in a world where every decision is shadowed by threat or incentive. Earlier, I asked whether national self-reliance is worth the trouble. Now, having watched this drama unfold, to be honest, I'm left with the uncomfortable sense that there is no safe answer. Every path extracts its price in money and jobs and the silent trade-offs that shape a country's destiny. But perhaps that's the point, Staying awake in this era means refusing the comfort of easy choices. It means recognizing, sometimes painfully, that power never relinquishes its hold without a struggle. And so for Canada and for anyone watching, the next move is not just a procurement decision, although I know that it feels that way. It's an answer to a deeper and much older question: are you willing to risk discomfort for the chance of something more? Before you go, if you've ever found yourself wondering how to make sense of these turning points, or if you want sharper tools for thinking clearly when big power shifts are happening, I wrote a book called Awake: The Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies. It's about finding your footing and your optimism even as headlines and alliances change by the hour. You'll find the book in the launch video link below, and there's a subscriber discount if you'd like to explore further. Thank you for being part of this conversation. If you enjoy the analysis, consider subscribing. There's much more coming, always with a focus on clarity, strategy, and the well-being of ordinary people. And if you're ready for a deeper dive, check out the other videos linked here, especially the one on the soft Gripen's impact. Until next time, stay awake, stay curious, and keep building towards something better.